If you're doing the same drills for all of your pitchers, if you're doing the same drills for everybody, 25% of them are getting better. 25% of them are not getting any better. 25% are getting worse, and 25% are hurt. And I think that's probably right.
Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for joining us. This episode is brought to you by Baseball Cloud. Baseball Cloud's revolutionary software platform brings to life the numbers captured by TrackMan and FlightScope. This provides colleges, players, and facility owners around the world a turnkey product, allowing them to analyze their data using key metrics and custom visualizations on one intuitive user interface. Go to baseballcloud.com to find out how you can have your own data analytics department for your program. Data has a story to tell, and Baseball Cloud gives it a voice. During this episode, I interview Adam Moseley, head baseball coach at Hoover High School in Hoover, Alabama. Since taking the job in 2014, Hoover has had 5 state playoff berths, 29 college signees, and in 2017, they won the Alabama 7A state championship. Coach Moseley was also the world champion 2018 USA Baseball 15U pitching coach. And on the show, he offers an informative discussion about what it takes for him to develop their pitching staff, how they establish the team culture for new players, and how he gets to know each of his players better personally. This episode is so good, and here is Adam Moseley. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Definitely. Well, I've been trying to get you on for a couple years now, and I'm finally excited that you took me up on my invitation and we get to dive in on player development. And I know you're one of the best guys in the country, and whether you admit that or not, I've had several sources that have told me so, and several that have worked closely with you and had nothing but good things to say about you. So I'm really excited to really grill you with some questions and see what you guys are doing, and hopefully steal a bunch of different ideas.
Well, yeah, I think you have to maybe question what kind of judge of character you are based on what you just said. But I'm whatever those guys have said about me, I'm very thankful for them saying it, and I'm excited to do this. It's always fun to kind of examine what you do as a coach, and maybe even look for holes in it, and going through kind of organizing some thoughts prior to something like this. It kind of always points out maybe different ways you could get better, and maybe also some highlights of things that maybe we do well that other people might get something out of. Oh,
no doubt. And, something that I try and look for within the coaching world is sustained excellence. And you guys have, obviously you're talented, but you guys have been really good for as long as you've been there. And before we jump with both feet in, can you give us a little short snapshot of how you decided to, or where you're from, and really how you decided to get into coaching?
Yeah, so I grew up, we moved a little bit when I was a kid, but when I was in high, I lived in Huntsville, Alabama, and kind of at that point I knew I wanted to be a coach, and, God put that in my head, and that's kind of, I just knew at that point that's what I wanted to do, and so it drove where I decided to go to college. I played at Birmingham Southern for Coach Shoup, and I kind of picked walking on at Birmingham Southern because I thought, he could really mentor me. And I was self-aware enough to know that I needed some mentoring too, for sure. I knew I didn't have it all figured out. No matter how I acted, I did know that. When I was there at Birmingham Southern, I was lucky enough to play for, these 3 coaches are incredible men. You got Brian Shoup, Darren Schoenrock, who's now the head coach at Memphis. He was our pitching coach for 3 of my years. And then Butch Thompson was an assistant coach in varying roles for 3 of my 4 years there.
Oh, fantastic.
So, it was great. And you kind of are going to get to absorb a ton of things just by being there. And I like to tell people that, anybody could have come out of that program the way Coach Shoup ran it, being ready to be a coach, at least in some form or fashion. Doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but at least, you at least have a very good fundamental knowledge of the game. And, if you look at what's happened with Coach Shoup's program and the coaches he's had, his coaching tree is pretty amazing. And so hopefully I get a chance to, maybe be a positive impact on that coaching tree a little bit, and not like those guys have been, but, I always kind of point things back to him. And then another man I point things back to is where I went right after Birmingham Southern. When I got done playing, and I was not very good, just an average left-handed pitcher who thought he was better than he was. But I went and I knew, again, I wanted to be a coach, and I looked around for the best program you could possibly find. And it was actually the best high school program probably in the Southeast at that point, was in Birmingham. It's Vestavia Hills High School, and Sammy Dunn was there. And so I kind of annoyed him and continuously called him until he couldn't say no. And I was going to be in graduate school at UAB. And so while I was in graduate school, I just came and helped with him and through batting practice and tried to soak some stuff up. And then from there, I bounced around. Once I started actually coaching, I bounced around I started at Vestavia, then went to Moody, and then got an opportunity to go back to where I went to high school at Grissom High School in Huntsville. Mm-hmm. And I was there as an assistant for 3 years and then a head coach for 8. And it was really a neat experience to be able to coach where you went to high school. And then at the end of that 8th year, I got a phone call from a really good friend of mine. He's now our athletic director at Hoover, Andy Urban. And Andy asked if I would want to talk about coming down to Hoover and being a coach there. And I said, well, sure, let's talk. And so I sat down and talked with him. And it's one of those things, like, I was at my destination job, my dream job, and I was 30 years old when I got the head coaching job at my dream job. And I still loved Grissom and where I went to high school and everything else, but you have to, I think hopefully one thing maybe people will get from this and listen to me talk is you do have to do what's best for your family at any point. And moving to Hoover, I was given the opportunity to maybe see them a little more, provide a great setup for them, which Grissom did as well. But that's the goal, is, just be able to provide what you can in the best way possible for your family. At least as a coach, you're not going to be able to do it financially. So you hope you can provide some other things for them. And so, I've been at Hoover for 5 years, and this will be my 6th year. And we've had a pretty fun run here. We've had a lot of college players and a lot of great young men that we've been able to coach. And it's been a great experience.
I love that. And I love to see a short snapshot of where you're coming from, just because I think we've all had those mentors that we look back, and at the time we're looking ahead and trying to figure out what we're trying to do, and at the same time they're trying to mold us into the best version of ourselves, and that's really awesome to hear. And so let's go ahead and jump into this fall and what you guys are doing currently. And what does the fall look like for you? What are your time restrictions, and how do you get the most out of them? So just take us through a typical week, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So in Alabama, we have some different rules. I know every state does, and ours, essentially, we can spend as much time as we want in strength training and conditioning with our kids. There really isn't a limit on that. But when it comes to skill development, we can have 5 guys at a time in a group with one coach for 2 hours a day. So that right there, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because you can have one group at a time on your campus anywhere working. So when you've got, say, 40 guys to work out, that could turn into a long week pretty quick. So there's a big premium on being efficient with what we do. And so with that being said, it's basically a balancing act of strength training and conditioning along with skill development. And so what we do, our strategy for that is actually first, I guess, in August, when we get back to school, we'll do our tryouts at that point. And so that basically will be we get 5 days that we can try kids out. And so we'll take those 5 days early in August, middle of August, and we'll try them out and we'll get our roster. We have 3 teams at Hoover. We got a varsity, a JV, and a freshman team. And so out of that, generally the varsity is going to be 25-ish. The JV and the freshmen are, hopefully upper teens, somewhere right there. And a lot of that is dictated by, how many guys are going to play up. And we definitely try to go with what most coaches would tell you, is that, we're going to try and play the best 9 at all times. And, sometimes that includes young guys and sometimes it doesn't. I would say if you got a good program, hopefully the older guys are really good contributors because you've been developing them as they come in, and you're not just relying on the next guy to come as a freshman or whatever. Mm-hmm. But so we'll do that tryout in August, and then we'll start our strength training as soon as it gets done. And what we do is we hire out a company called Godspeed, and so the guy's name is Lance Rhodes, and he has started this business years ago. He's a Hoover graduate, and almost every NFL guy that lives in Birmingham, it seems like, they train with him in the off season, and a lot of the baseball guys too. They train there as well. And so he's going to come to our place 3 days a week, and they're his. And our coaches exist in a support role at that point, because, what I used to try to learn everything I could about strength training. And what I learned is it's just so hard to keep up with it because
absolutely.
it's, you got Eric, that's right. You got Eric Cressy and all those guys that are out there just constantly changing, pushing the envelope and learning and doing all that stuff. And either I could keep that on myself or on my plate, my coach's plate, or we can make a financial commitment, a fundraising commitment, and a program-wide commitment to let's go get a guy that can help us out. And he spends early in the year, he teaches our coaches what he is going to do with our guys. He teaches us cueing to use with those guys. And we want them to do these things at this time and in these positions, all those kinds of things. And then he takes it and runs with it. And the neat thing about it is I think a lot of times if you're running your strength training program, you only kind of exist with the guy that's in the front of the line. And now we can exist with the guys that are throughout the whole line of anything. We can be with the guy in the back of the line watching him sweat and helping and encouraging and developing relationships and watching them do everything they do and just working through it with them instead of maybe existing in that overseeing role. Now we're kind of in a situation where we are working. We're not actually working out with them, but we're right there with them the whole time. And so that's been a blessing for us to have Lance. It's great. It's been a blessing to have him, and he treats kids right. And I think, if I were advocating for any coach for, something, hey, what's the place I can make a jump? Well, just think about what we're doing there. We're gaining time in our lives by now I'm not going home on the weekends planning the workouts for the week, at least in the weight room, I'm not. And we're gaining relationships by being able to build them with those players while they're doing stuff. And we're putting another positive role model in their life. And I think you can't have enough of that. If you don't have positive male role models in their lives, they're running to a role model, whether they know it or not. So let's go find the best ones we can have and let's get them around them. So that's every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's Monday, Wednesday in the afternoons. And then Friday morning we come in at 6. And I know a lot of people want to lift in the mornings, and I'm not knocking it, but I also know that I like to see my kids in the morning. And I know that most studies would say that high school athletes are in better shape physically to get their workout in the afternoon. And so we do that Monday, Wednesday, well, really Monday through Thursday afternoon, we're doing something.
Okay.
And then Friday morning, we're coming in the morning just so, football's big at Hoover and we're incredibly supportive of it. But yeah, they've won a couple games. They'll be on TV once or twice. And
sure.
So we want to give them Friday afternoon to go be a kid and go to a game or do whatever it is they're going to do. A lot of them are going to go play in tournaments over the weekends and things like that. And so it just fits that schedule. So that's our strength training. And then our Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to, once we get to about the end of September, we'll start throwing. We'll do a long toss program for a long period of time, about a month. And then what we do, frankly, is we just backdate. I like a lot of what Driveline does. They've got a lot of structure to what they do. It's been great. And I think their sequencing of stuff is just obviously fantastic. And so we just backdate off of some of their throwing programs and hacking the kinetic chain, the on-ramping and that sort of thing. And that just tells us when we're really starting to grind that thing out. And the deal is, though, the players they've got to run it. We can't, by rule, code with them. So what we're going to do before then is try and develop leaders that can go in there and run it for them and go, hey, they set the balls out for us. We've got an hour to get some throwing done until the end of the school day. So let's go get some throwing done. And the coaches literally can't say anything. We have to stay over to the side or we're breaking rules. So it's a positive, negative type deal because it's forcing you to develop some leaders, even though you want to get out there and, get your hands on them and, hey, get in this position or do this or do that. And the only time we can actually do that is in that 5-on-1 setting.
Right.
So
that's tough.
So the only other thing on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well is we're going on Thursdays. We're going to we have a yoga program. This is the first year we've done it, and we're going to bring somebody in to teach these guys a little bit of flexibility. I think it's a hole in our program. And so, Tuesday will be more of a conditioning after they throw, and Thursday they're going to go into some yoga and do all this. And there ain't no telling what these yoga people are going to do with them. But I know I've never done it myself, but I know it. I also have never talked to the guy who went, I didn't feel like I got better from doing yoga. It seems like everybody, they benefit from it.
Sure. My wife and I have actually started doing yoga on the weekends just because, if you'd have talked to me 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it's a pendulum swing with most things in life, and especially baseball. It's you don't want baseball players to get too big and strong, in the 80s, and then they go through the steroid era in the 90s and early 2000s. So everybody's just pumping iron and getting huge. And now it's getting back to, okay, now mobility is obviously important too. And that's something that, just for the health benefits long term, for sure, it's something that I've seen in a short period of time, and your players will benefit from it for sure. And so, man, that's really good. So I hear that you are really good at developing pitchers, and I don't know with the 5-on-1. That's got to be tough to do that. But just give us a look inside what you do for that, and just again with the small groups and not a ton of time. I'm really interested to see how you do that.
Well, I think it all has to work together. That's the first thing, and so I would say the vast majority of high school kids, when they get ready to start learning, if you're trying to build them up and teach them how to throw and you want them to throw harder and all that kind of stuff, to me, a lot of people do it wrong, and they try to get them in these fixed positions and get them in these drills where they all look the same. And I'm so anti that. I want them to be the best athlete they can possibly be. Mm-hmm. And just in my heart of hearts, I know the best athlete on the mound means that in the 7th inning of the biggest game of the year, he's able to make the adjustment that he has to make to get the guy out. Whether it's all working for him or whether it's not working for him that day, the better athletes always win. And so that is the heart of what we try to do, is to develop athletes that pitch. We long toss a ton. I got into that a little bit already, but, I believe wholeheartedly that, the Jaeger program is right. Let's go throw it as far as we can. When I was a kid growing up, we'd try to throw it over the fence, and we didn't get there, but, I'd throw it off the side of my house, thousands and thousands of balls off the side of my house. And we had a brick house, and I'd throw tennis balls, not baseballs, but tennis balls off the side of my house. Mm-hmm. And my arm worked just fine. And I never really had much problem until I got to college, and that was way down the road. And I think, so generally, let's make the best athlete we can. And we're going to long toss a lot. I think that, there's a lot of velocity building that's going to come out of that. We're going to implement our driveline program that we do. And what we're trying to do, I know 5-on-1s sound weird, or not weird, but tough to work with. But if you think about it, each kid's got a flaw or a mechanical issue to work on. Okay. So maybe he flies open with his front side. Maybe his glove side doesn't work. Maybe his pelvis isn't engaged. All these different possibilities. Well, let's get all those guys together. So, hey, this whole group of 5, each of you has kind of the same general thing going on. So let's train them together in that group. Okay. And so one day a week, they're going to be with either myself or I've got a guy that helps me with pitching, and he's going to actually run most of our pitching this year, a guy named Aaron Wasserman, who he pitched in the big leagues. And so he's going to help. He's on our staff at Hoover. And so one of us is working with these guys once a week. So working it within the 5-on-1 framework, if you're a dual guy, which most high school kids are, you pitch and hit, then you're going to get an hour of hitting and an hour of pitching per week with us. So it's pretty, at that point, then what we're going to do is our 5-on-1 time is going to be mechanical. And then our other time is going to be the long toss and that mm-hmm. sort of thing, where a coach doesn't necessarily have to be on top of you. And frankly, it may be better that he's not, that you just set the balls out and you say, hey man, come back after your arm's done. And so that's kind of how that's our sequencing of it and the way we break it up. And I would advocate to anybody that if you're doing the same drills for all of your pitchers, you're not, I think I saw a quote by Eric Cressy the other day. I think that's who it was. But if you're doing the same drills for everybody, 25% of them are getting better. 25% of them are not getting any better. 25% are getting worse, and 25% are hurt. I think that's probably right. Sure. And so we need to, tweak them up and see what can we do with this guy and what that all works back to during tryouts. We're going to video you. We're going to show it to you. We're going to say, hey, if you're on our team, that these are the things we see. We're going to try and explain it to you. And hey, this is what we think needs to happen with your wind up or your stretch or whatever. And then tell me what you feel, and then get a kind of a two-way street going. And the goal out of all of it is that in the end, you have a pitcher who knows his own routine, and you technically have to coach them. They know what they're supposed to do. And your job then is to be almost supervisory and just building that relationship even stronger to make them work harder. If you can get to that point, all of our best pitchers that we've had could run their own season. They just could. By the time the season got there, they go, all right, coach, today I need to do this. Tomorrow I need to do this. That's what you want. And your pregame, I think back to a kid. We won the state championship 2 years ago, and I think back to a kid, Brock Guffey, who was unbelievable for us. He's a left-handed pitcher. At one point, he was on a 67-inning streak where he gave up 1 earned run in 67 innings. It was unbelievable. Wow. I've never coached a pitcher like him. And so Alabama's state championship was best 2 out of 3. And so we played Friday night, and we got beat. And then Saturday, the game started at 10. And Brock liked to sleep. And Brock, he liked to sleep and like drink Dr. Pepper. It's the weirdest thing ever. So we said that the hotel we stayed in was walking distance to the ballpark. But where we're taking batting practice was 20 minutes away. Well, what sense did it mean for him to go to batting practice? It didn't make any sense at all. So I said, Brock, we'll be done with BP and back at the field at 9. And he said, all right, coach, I'll see you there. And he took care of his own business. And he walks in the park at 9, walks in with us when we're walking in, and he goes and throws a 2-hitter and strikes out 12. And, that's when you got – no, it's not bad at all. And that's when you've got a guy you can trust that has built it in himself, and he's built up his ability to run a routine out and do his own thing within the structure of our program. And so I guess that's a long description of kind of how we're doing it. I would say that there is literally no perfect answer. It's always going to change. What you watch us do next year would be different than what we do this year, just because the makeup of the team would be different.
Oh, no doubt. I really enjoy hearing that and putting a ton of ownership on him, and it sounds like he earned that throughout the year. And so I'm imagining myself coming to Hoover as a player, right? And I know that the tradition, and I know the athletic program. And another question that I really like is, what type of environment do you like to set up? So what's something that you do in the fall, or maybe even in the spring, of how do you integrate your incoming players, whether it be freshmen or incoming upperclassmen that are new to the program? How do you get them on the same programs that you're talking about with the pitcher that you just described? So how are you integrating them into the culture, and how are you building that? How are you building leaders in that program so you can, once you get to the season, you can kind of let them do what they know is best for themselves?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And I think first of all, you have to be willing to trust a kid. And I think if you don't trust kids and trust that their heart is in the right place, then you probably ought to start there and then figure that part out before you even worry about integrating anything.
100%.
Because, I love I think by the time you get to be a senior in our program, I told our seniors that graduated this past year, it's the closest I've ever felt to a class. And I think you should feel that way as a coach by the time they're seniors. And I hope you feel that way earlier. Sure. But, sometimes you can't. So what we're going to do, first thing, we've got kind of a big brother, little brother program that we started last year. And we're going to, we got to keep tweaking it and making it better and better. But essentially what that is if you played on the varsity last year, that could be a rising senior. This year would be a rising senior and rising juniors. We have a couple of those that played last year. And so they're going to have at least one, if not two, of the new kids that we keep in our program as little brothers. And their job's just to start developing a relationship. And, there's not a whole lot of forced activity in that, just because you want that to develop, I think, organically. But what we do have them do is do things like if their little brother's grades are going poorly, or if they have their little brother's acting poorly in class or something like that, then we're going to go to the older guy and say, hey, man, I need you to help us address this. And just be, the coaches are going to address it, but then the older player is going to help be a parrot almost for the coach and say, hey, hopefully saying the same thing the coach is saying. We can't always guarantee it, but hopefully they are. So we got that. Our workouts, all those in the off season are sophomore through senior. And this year we're going to have the freshmen come in that don't play football. They're going to be there as well. So anytime you start sharing sweat and you're all sweating together, I think the culture builds right away.
I like that.
And I think so. We're going to finish every workout with some sort of a competitive finisher. And real quick, the seniors and the older guys figure out, all right, who can I count on and who needs to be pushed. And I would say hopefully that people think that our team really does compete well overall most of the time. And I think it all builds from the weight room and from those daily activities that, it's nonstop every day that we're going to try to finish with something that's competitive. And because they're all together there, it kind of breeds itself at that point. And, I knew we had a chance to have something good from a culture standpoint, I know we do, when they're not picking all the seniors first. And when they're picking a team that's not picking all seniors first, they may pick a junior or a sophomore or a freshman first because they know he's better for whatever activity we're about to do. And I think it's a big way for us to create our culture. We don't have it all figured out, but at least we're I hope on the right track.
Sure. No, I think that's a really good explanation, and I really like the big brother, little brother stuff. And besides them, just kind of integrating the new guys into the program, are there any specific things that you kind of require them to do? I've heard about this stuff before, but it's a whole nother thing to get to hear some creativity behind it, especially someone who has done it for a couple of years.
Yeah. So there's some simple stuff that we're going to do, or that we do. It's simple stuff like, hey, listen, you need to, y'all by the end of the week, need to take your little brother out to eat or do something with him. Whatever it might be. You tell me what you're going to do. And, that way there's not a specific pressure on it, like, hey, we got to go out tonight or anything like that. But I would tell any coach, if you've got, say, a Buffalo Wild Wings in town or something like that, there's a plug for Buffalo Wild Wings right there. But if you've got one, they've always got a 25-cent wing night. Well, how about this? It's either Tuesday or Thursday night in Hoover, 25-cent boneless on one night and regular wings. I don't remember which one's which. And I think sometimes they're Monday night. Well, how about you just tell those guys, hey, go pick him up. We've told the parents, hey, they have this big brother that it's not something creepy or weird when this older guy's calling your son. It's just part of what they're asked to do. And so go pick them up and go eat wings. Because you can eat a whole lot of 25-cent wings for not very much money.
Right.
And so we got stuff like that. We got stuff where we will go to, our other sports at Hoover are pretty successful. And so we'll load them up and we'll all go take a bus to, like this year, our basketball team was making a run. Our girls basketball team won a state championship, and we'll load a bus up and go watch them. And that's every class is eligible to get on that bus as long as their grades are right. So we'll do some fun things like that, and just kind of get them all around each other and just let their personality fill the room. Let them become individuals around each other. I think it's neat when a senior says, hey, little Johnny down there, coach, he likes to fish. I'm going to go take him fishing one day. And nobody knew that going in, but all of a sudden they're going out there seeing who can catch the biggest fish. And we've got, despite the common perception on the outside looking in, we got some good quality redneck fishermen in Hoover that can
cool.
go fish, and they enjoy that. They enjoy that kind of thing. And we got guys a lot of our guys are on the front row of a student section on Friday nights for football games, and they got their little brother there with them watching and being a part of that as well. And it breeds itself. But the global answer on it too is, hey, the seniors need to be involved in planning this stuff as well. Like if the coach is doing it, it's one thing. But if you go to the seniors and go, all right, guys, here, I need y'all to come up with some ideas for what you think would help develop that relationship, they're going to come up with a lot better ideas most of the time than we can. The way it is.
Right. And it's not forced.
They're awesome at it. That's right. It's not forced. You just tell them. I would say that the biggest concept is give them a certain number of touches or times they need to be around those guys in an out of baseball setting, and then let them kind of develop it as much as possible.
Oh, perfect. And, I know we see a lot of stuff online and a lot of stuff that is a little bit forced. And I think there's some definite benefit to that. But I also think that once you guys spend a ton of time together, I think that it will organically happen, because for the most part, baseball players are all the same, whether you're looking at a 30-year-old big leaguer or an 18-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid. If you put them on a ping pong table, they're all going to act exactly the same. Or if you put them on a PS4, they're all going to act the same. So it's really interesting to see that, and I love that aspect of it. But what about yourself? You mentioned that you were really close to the seniors this past year, and that's something that I think can also happen organically, but I think it's also something that if we're not conscious about, we can let it slip and think that we're doing actually more than we actually are. And so what are some different strategies you use to just make sure you're hitting everyone, you're getting to know everyone, and you're not just, I feel like especially in our position groups, we talk to those guys all the time, but we may miss out on a lot of other people, and especially as the head coach. So what are some different strategies you use to help with that?
Well, that's a great question. And I 100% agree that you can think you're closer than you are. And so the first and maybe the most basic strategy for me is I have a list of our players, and I just keep it updated of number of times, or like when I talk to them, I'm just going to ask them, how's everything going? How you doing? Anything going on? And if they want to talk about it, great. If not, that's fine too. Normally they'll bring something out. Those conversations will come after a workout. They'll come with the seniors, that our seniors can get out of class a little earlier if they've done their job academically, and up until their senior year, a lot of them are only in school for half the day. And so they got some downtime. They're at the field a little earlier than everybody else. And so those conversations would happen then. They'll happen after a practice. I've got a former coach of mine. He's a pastor. He helped us coach at Grissom, and he had a thing he called the 325 walk. And he would literally just start with a guy. Jay Billis does this thing in basketball now on their ESPN thing before games. They walk to the end of the court and back. Well, that coach, his name's Ralph Keel. He would walk from home plate to the foul pole with them and just talk. And it was a really neat thing. And so all those things are good, but I write them down, or don't write them down. I type them up, and I've got a chart of like, all right, I talked to little Johnny on March 1st, and this was going on. Okay. And so what I try to do is get, a touch every 2 weeks, a talk every 2 weeks with our guys, and they probably don't know what's going on. And I don't really want them to know what's going on. Right. I just, want them to know that we're invested in them. And so my coaches don't even know this, but they're going to be asked to do the same thing. I haven't made our assistant coaches do it, but I'm going to ask them to do the same thing, this year. And I think that's one way. So you get some intent. You have to be intentional about it. You can't just, absolutely. Yeah, you can't just be coincidental. It's got to be an intentional development. Another personal development thing with our players is we have a chaplain that comes and works with our kids. And chaplain's probably not even the right term. He's a pastor at a local Baptist church, and he only talks to them about Jesus if they want to talk about Jesus. He's really more talking to them about being a young man and what's the right way to handle certain situations. And he's a sounding board. And it was really neat. When I took the job at Hoover, we have a common friend who said, you need to get this guy involved in your program. And I said, okay, why? And he told me, his name is Jeff James. And Pastor Jeff will show up, and his rules, he only had a couple rules. He said, I need to have unfiltered access to your program. Whatever y'all are doing, I need to be allowed to do it. Okay. He said, and I need gear. He said, because I don't want to be dressed like a pastor. I want to be dressed like a Hoover person. I said, okay, that's fine. It's a little bit extra money for the gear, and you get to come to everything we do. And I said, that's easy. And so he's in our dugout in big games. He's in our dugout a lot. He'll walk up to a practice. We do a character class with these guys, with our guys, with him involved, and how to act in certain situations. And he writes letters to our guys, and he asks, he'll share some things with me that they say, but only if they give him permission to. And I think as a head coach, you got to feel comfortable turning that loose. And you don't need to know everything. But I also know that Jeff or one of my assistant coaches can come up and go, hey, this kid's got something going on today. Let's just watch him. And that's all I need to know until I officially need to know something. But you have to have that level of relationship with your assistant coaches and with someone else who's involved in your program that you can trust them to develop that relationship with the kids. So that's, I guess, some of the ways that we kind of try to stay on top of those guys and, stay involved in their life and that sort of thing. I think the other thing that I kind of thought you might write or ask a question like that. So I had a note, and I said, I think you need to let them see you fail. It's part of who I am as a coach. I'm going to mess up a lot. And I think they need to see you fail, see how you respond to failure. And then you're working towards teaching them how to be a man, because we're all going to mess up. We all know that. And so if they don't see you fail, and if all you ever do is be perfect, then I don't know that you've ever actually told them, what real life is going to be like. So that's part of our thing. And there's a lot of people who tell you we fail a lot. A lot of parents probably think we fail more than we should. And that's okay. That's right. That's their right to have an opinion. But I think even taking something like that, you need to take how somebody criticizes you and handle it right, handle it the correct way. And you're always modeling for your players how to handle those sorts of things.
100%. Yeah, being vulnerable is a huge aspect of, true. We talk about you've talked about trust a lot, and I talk about trust a lot as well on most podcasts, and that's a huge part of it. Is if you're asking them to fail in a game of failure, and we're not showing some vulnerability as well, then I think that that's just us trying to be really, or just trying to be more than we are, and not being authentic. And, I think that, especially on a guy that's won a state title and, Team USA coach and being as successful as you are, I'm sure from the outside looking in, it seems like, and I'm sure you hold yourself to an extremely high standard. And so for them to see you trying new things and trying to not necessarily fail, but being okay with it and getting better because of it, I am sure that gets you a ton of street cred, not only with your players, but also your coaches. And another aspect that I really think that we as a baseball community can do better at, and one, I think vulnerability is one, but also the point I'm getting to next is coaching development, and especially with our assistant coaches. And, from the top down, our head coach may be the greatest guy on earth, God's gift to baseball, but if he isn't developing his assistant coaches in a way that is really good, then I think that everyone suffers. I think that the head coach is going to be exhausted at the end of the day, but also your assistants are the ones in the trenches every single day with the players, and they're the ones who kind of have a better pulse for the team, because as a head coach, you've got a ton of stuff going on. So a couple of questions built into one. How do you develop your assistant coaches, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a great question, and I think there's 1,000 ways to look at it. First and foremost, I think it goes into who you're hiring. You need to hire guys that fit the development profile that you're looking for. So, I want to hire a guy who wants to be a lifelong learner. That would be maybe the most important thing, other than how you treat people. Is this guy going to be a lifelong learner? And so that's the first part of it. But for me personally, learning and developing, I want to be a visitor to people. I want to go places, and I don't want to go alone. Not that I'm scared to travel alone, but that I don't think that we're accomplishing a lot if the head coach is the only one traveling to go learn. So what I try to do, and I want my assistant coaches to be able to do, and we're lucky enough at Hoover to have some resources to help us do this, but we try to go travel places and learn stuff. And I've been lucky. You mentioned the USA baseball experience, and been lucky enough to develop some relationships there. But if I see enough of somebody on Twitter or on somewhere else, or hear somebody talk about someone else enough, I'm gonna try and go visit them. Last year, we loaded up and went to Driveline, and I didn't want the red carpet experience. I wanted to show up and see what they do every single day. So we called and said, "Hey, we're coming. Is that okay if we come at this time?" And we just showed up, and Devin Morgan, the guy who just recently on the Driveline podcast did one about youth baseball, he just showed us around and said, "Hey, y'all go and y'all look at and see whatever." Well, I had to define y'all for him because he didn't know what that meant. But he said, "You go around and let's." And so we just went, so we were out there, and we've been with USA Baseball. I got to get to know Dan Hefner really well, and we went and visited him, and he's a stud, and it's not necessarily where you would think. If you're looking at this whole deal on the outside looking in, and it's Dallas Baptist, where I thought I would end up learning as much as anywhere else. And once you do your research, it's that is the case, but not everybody knows about that place. And it's it's arguably the best culture I've ever seen. But I think that's why you visit, is that you feel their culture. Like when we were at Driveline, we're there on a velocity day, and those guys are walking around that room, and they're as jacked up as a football player getting ready to come out of the tunnel in the Iron Bowl. I mean, that's their Iron Bowl that day, and they're going to throw it as hard as they can. And I think of Dallas Baptist, and we go visit there, and we visited on a Friday, and our football team is playing Allen, Texas that night. And so we go to the game, and Saturday morning we go to visit again at Dallas Baptist, and we roll up, and it's their first weekend, and I'm thinking, all right, it's a Saturday. It's college kids. Saturday morning is probably going to be rough. And I walk out there, and they're doing a bunt set, listening to praise and worship music on the stereo system or on the loudspeaker. And I'm like, so there's your culture. And I never would have known that just by talking to somebody on the phone. And then, so we visited there. We've gone to, our colleges in the state of Alabama are incredible. You got Sanford, Casey at Sanford's unbelievable, arguably the best hitting guy in the country. UAB's got a great staff, Alabama, Auburn. So I think you've got to be plugged into these places and be involved in what they're doing. I think every college staff in our state and in most states is so accommodating to high school coaches that you're wasting your time if you don't go visit them. Go take a day off of work and go. And so I think being a visitor is the most important thing in terms of developing our coaches. But the second thing, and this is what I know I had to get better at, and we're working on it this year, is defining their roles and let them shape their role a little bit.
Sure.
So, for example, I talked to, you had Chan Brown on, maybe, I don't even remember how long ago that was. And I listened to it on a run. And the most important thing I took from that was he said he has a sheet that every coach's role is defined. And I said, well, I don't have that. And that's not very smart by me that I don't have that. So we're going to have that now, and we're going to have a role. And then, all right, here's your role, piece by piece by piece. Now you go make it better. And you tell me what I can do to make your role, what I can do to help you grow your role as much as possible. Right. And so, I think that's a big deal to trust them to handle that role. And, we got an offensive guy, a pitching guy, an infield guy, a hitting guy, whatever it might be. And are you empowering them to go learn something? And are you, we talked about trust and that sort of thing. Do you trust them enough for them to come back and go, hey, what we've been doing, probably, I think we can do it better if we do this. Mm-hmm. And that's when it really works, I think, at that point. So on the back of that, we're going to add in a new thing every Monday this year. We're going to add in, it's going to be a Moonshot day. Google has their little Moonshot concept where they just, what would be the best thing ever if we could do this? Well, I think Driveline does something similar, that they have their employees stand in front of their whole staff and they give a talk about, some research they've been doing or whatever. And then the staff pokes holes in it. Well, every one of my staff is going to on Monday get 5 minutes to talk about their area. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, this week I've been reading about this book on hitting, and I think these things could work for us. We're going to add them to our playbook, and then the rest of the staff's going to try and poke a hole in it. Mm-hmm. Or go, hey, that's a great idea, let's do it. Sure. And so now they're developing and getting better, and it does all go back to trust. So you got to trust those guys to, once you define that role, to take it and run with it.
Coaches, your players aren't afraid to work hard. They just can't afford to get it wrong. And that is why you should attend the 2019 Skill Acquisition Summit, hosted by Randy Sullivan's Florida Baseball Ranch and the Strength of Skills from the Netherlands. This annual event will take place on October 12th and the 13th in Lakeland, Florida. This event will have a premier panel of presenters including Frans Bosch from the Netherlands and Rob Gray from Arizona State University. The most forward-thinking coaches in the business will funnel the information down to the bare bones of on-the-field application of leading-edge skill acquisition and motor learning science. You will leave equipped to help your players optimize the return on their training time. For more information, call 1-866-STRIKE-3 or go to floridabaseballranch.com/summit. Presenters include Frans Bosch, Rob Gray, Martine Nijhoff, Bart Honegroff, David Mann, Paul Venner, Ron Woolforth, and Coach Randy Sullivan, who will serve as host and moderator for this exciting event. I will be in attendance, and I hope to see you there. Wow, there's just so much to unpack there, and so let me try and do the best I can with the shortest amount of time because the guests aren't listening.
Okay.
For me, the first one is, I think that some listeners will be surprised at DBU bunts. I think that is, awesome. And I did hear it. Dan's an awesome guy, and I think that you're crazy if you're in the area and you haven't gone and visited him, because not only is he an awesome coach, he's an awesome man and raising several great kids, and he knows exactly who he is. And another, I heard him at a clinic a couple of years ago, and he said, guys, we hit backside ground balls to the second baseman. And everybody just kind of looked at him, And he goes, we may be trying to break the second baseman's shins, but we try and hit hard ground balls to second base too, just for barrel control. And I really like that. And he's awesome. And another thing, just to add on to your roles sheet, after talking with Chan, and I actually mentioned it to our head coach too, and sent him the sheet that Chan sent me, which is really, really good. But just from an assistant standpoint, I think it takes out a lot of confusion that we have on whose job is what. And, and there are some coaches who just want to know their job and do their job, and there's some that want to exceed what they're doing and to take on a role of some different things. And so I really do think that's we have a sheet for the kids for field work on everybody's job. And, I think that's only fair to not necessarily put them in a box of this is only what you can do, but hey, you're expected to do this and you're expected to do that. So just when we know that something's not done, we can help that person get that stuff done, and we know whose role is what and whatnot. But I really like that, and I love your moonshot concept. I think that's really, really good, and man, there's a lot of cool stuff that you guys are doing, and I mean it sounds like that you would be a great guy to work for.
Well, I probably mess that up a lot, and I'd probably I don't know if we may ask too much of them sometimes, but I don't know if I'm good to work for or not, frankly. But I think I just believe that if you're hiring the people that fit your personality and fit what you want your program to look like, I think these things they're gonna happen. But they could happen organically, or you could speed them up by putting some labels to them as well. But I do agree that if you give them a role, and you don't want them to just stay necessarily in that box, but you want to make sure that box is taken care of before they go to somebody else's.
Right, 100%. And so when we're talking about assistant coaches, what's your hiring process look like? And I was actually talking to a coach this past weekend, and great coach, and so this is something that I've never been the head of a program, and there are some that your athletic director hires you or at least gives you suggestions, and there's some coaches that you want and you've seen them work. And so I was asking him, I said, I really wish that I could see them work with kids before you get them in the hiring process. And if you can't, what are some different ways that you get, because at the end of the day, our kids are our biggest BS meters, and if they're not willing to work with them, and it's really tough to see that in an interview because some people are really good interviewers. And so I asked him, and this is what I'm about to ask you too. I said, what are some different things you do in an interview, and what are some questions that you ask to kind of get through that? And he said, well, he's a college coach, and he said, well, I actually give a couple of my kids my credit card, take them out to lunch, and make them interview him. And I said, what? And he goes,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. He said that, and there'll be guys that I want to hire, and they come back and say, I would not play for that guy. And I don't know how on earth I would ever do something like that, or if we're in the amateur level, we could do anything like that. But I thought that was really unique. And what are some different ways that you interview guys and just not necessarily grill them, but just get to know them and make sure that they're the best hire for you?
Well, that's I really wish you could watch them work with kids too. I think you nailed it on the head there, but I think you can figure out how they're going to work with kids if you maybe ask some important questions. And so the fact that I want us to kind of be a growth factory and a leadership factory and continuously growing as staff and everything else, I think. So the first question I would ask a guy, or the most important maybe, is I believe that you, in that rule of 5, that you're going to be the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's just kind of how your life's going to turn out. And so I ask them, who are the 5 most important people in their circle of life? Who are your 5 most important people that are going to influence you? And so, I've asked people that question before and found out, you talk about a BS meter, you can catch one real quick, because if he says somebody and you call that person, go, hey, Joe Smith really talked highly about his relationship with you, and that guy goes, man, I don't even know who that is. You got him right there. So, and it's not necessarily a gotcha society that we're trying to have here, but we're trying to find the right fit, because it's that important. These kids are with us for only 4 years. Some of them are only a year or 2. And we need to make sure that we got to do right by these parents to make sure they can trust us. So you want everybody kind of being able to pull on the same rope. So obviously if their circle is strong and it's a quality set of people, that's one thing. Another question I ask, and it's very important to me, is is what does a game night look like for you and your family? You know, my wife and I was blessed to have been blessed to have 3 daughters, and they're at everything we do. Unless they're playing a game, they're at everything we do, and they're going to sit right next to our dugout. And we have got a great facility, and they're going to sit right there in front of my office next to our dugout, and they're going to watch everything. And they know every one of my players. They know their numbers. They know their walk-up songs. They sing their walk-up songs at my house, and that's the standard for me of what I want people we hire to be like. Now, everybody's not going to be married, but if they are, boy, I want people that their families come to games. You know, that matters. I think it matters with our players, because I hope that I'm teaching our players every single day how to treat a woman and how to treat a girl by how I interact with my family. And when I mess up, I hope they see that, and they see me have to rehab that mistake. But so that family is a big deal. And then the other question I would ask, then the last 2, how do you learn? I think, what do you do if you're going to go learn baseball? You say, man, I want to know. You can even give a guy like a scenario. Hey, I want to know. If you want to know more about hitting, where are you going to find that stuff out? And I think that tells a lot about the guy, their answer. And then last thing I think is, what's the proudest moment of your life? If it's an I-focused moment, it's a red flag to me. If it's a we-focused moment, then I think we got something we can work with probably. So.
Oh, fantastic. And you know, that's really good. And I've never been in the process of that, and I'm always curious because it's usually behind closed doors between a head coach and, you know, maybe an assistant every now and then. So that's always something that, you know, we want to hire the right guys, because they're going to be around the kids every single day, and a bad hire can set you back for a lot of years. And you know what?
Yes.
What is, just on a totally different topic, what are some different rules or standards that you have in your program? And, you know, ours are be on time and do things right, which are fairly broad, but I'd like to hear, you know, what your rules are and how you enforce those and how you make them important to them.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not a big, giant rule sheet guy, and our program is not full of tons of rules. And I think, you know, the more rules you put out there, the more that they start looking for ways they can get around them. But I also think, just like we talked about leadership and developing culture, I think if you can get those players involved in determining their rules, you got a lot better chance of having everybody pulling the same direction. So we started this process last year. We're going to do it again this year, and I know we're going to be even better at it this year. But Hoover is the land. When I got to Hoover, it was our football coach is the land of acronyms. Like he has an acronym for every year, and he's awesome at it.
Okay.
And he picks it. It's a motto every year. So for me, I want it to always be the same letters. So we're going to define bucks, and to start our year, once we have our team, we're going to literally define what the B, the U, the C, and the S mean. And so what we did last year, we just gave them a worksheet. And we said, hey, give me what your definition of each of those would be and 3 reasons why you chose each word. So what we settled on was brotherhood, undeniable, cultivating, and selfless. Right. And so that was all, you know, the year before that, we had a different set. And then the year before that, we had just a different meaning, a different word altogether. And so we're trying to give them some ownership in it. Well, once we have our words, then I divide our program into four groups, And so I thought this was going to be a quick activity, and one group took 2 days to do this, and it was awesome. But so I gave them a worksheet, and I said, guys, here's the deal. On this worksheet, I want you to be as honest as you can with answers from your group. And so for each of those words that we had picked, okay, brotherhood, undeniable, cultivating, and selfless. So like we wanted a team that was going to be tight, a bunch of brothers. We wanted a program that was going to be undeniable in big spots. We wanted a program that's cultivating, that's going to kind of, you know, build itself, continue to build itself, and guys that are selfless. So I asked them these 5 questions. I want you to give me 3 ways you can implement this word daily or this character trait daily. So they went through and did that. 3 ways you can implement this character trait in a practice. 3 ways you can implement it in a game. And then we got to, this is where the rules came in, 3 ways you can hold someone accountable to this trait.
That's good.
And 3 punishments for not holding up this trait. And you want to talk about awesome. You should see the punishments they came up. It was great. I was like, man, I don't ever have to come up with anything again. Like, you know, they had all kinds of great ideas. And you just kind of go off that, and they've made their rules. And now the coaches are going to guide it. We're not going to have something crazy in there. But if you've started to build your program the right way, the rules are going to the kids are going to define rules correctly, and it's going to run itself when it comes to that part of it. They're going to put some great stuff down, and it may be a little different than last year's, but this team's a little different than last year's team. And so let's make sure that we hold them accountable to it. And so that's what we try to do. And we're not 100% great at it, and we don't do it great all the time, but we at least, I think we're on the right track. And then I thought a couple highlights of some rules that maybe that they came up with last year. They thought they were really neat. The first one was never walk past a mistake. Now that was awesome. I gave him Jerry Jones is known as being kind of, tough to work for. He's on go all the time, but you read about the stories about Jerry Jones walking around his AT&T Stadium and seeing a piece of trash, and he just picks it up and puts it away. And he's that guy that never wants it to look bad. And I thought, if that guy's worth billions of dollars and he can do it, then I'm sure we can too. So that's the first one that I thought was really neat from last year's sheet. The next one, exceed expectations. I think just if you will make it a goal in everything that you do to exceed, go past the expectation of what you're supposed to be doing, it's great. The third one that our kids are really bought in, we stole it from the Cubs a couple of years ago, like a lot of people did, but we're going to celebrate wins, lots of wins. After every game, we're going to go in the locker room and have a good time. After big games, we're going to have a really good time. We might even go in our indoor hitting facility and have a little fun in there, but we're going to enjoy a win because, the travel ball culture, they win a game, they're worried about what the next game is. And we don't want to do that. We want to celebrate this one. And I can think back to 2 years ago in our state championship year, and we beat our biggest rival, and our kids are going to the indoor hitting facility. They're running over there as soon as they dogpile, and they're running in there, and they're turning the music on, and it's going to get all exciting and all that stuff. And I'm jogging over there after them, and our principal looks and goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, well, buddy, come on, come with me. I'll show you. I told him on the way what we're doing, and I opened the door, and our kids are going bananas, and he runs in there and stage dives in the middle of them.
That's
and
awesome.
It was awesome. And now he's a crazy Cajun, so it was right up his alley, but it was great. And I don't think people celebrate enough. They don't, they don't enjoy wins enough. And then the last one was, I think everybody has this, don't embarrass your program. And, hopefully we can hold up to those.
No, that sounds like an awesome time, and man, that's really, really good, and that's something that you're right. We usually take the losses extremely hard, and we just take wins like we're moving on to the next one. And no, that's something that I think sets you apart, and you're definitely the first person that I've had on that has told the story about basically mosh pitting after games, and that's especially getting some administration. It can get
rowdy in there. I've had water dumped on me. I've snuck in the backside and dumped water on them. It's fun. If it's not fun, I'm not sure why we're doing it in the long. At the end of the day, if winning isn't fun, then I'm not sure why we're doing it.
Definitely.
Everything to get the win may not be fun, but once you do it, it needs to be fun.
Sure. Well, what does the spring look like for you? And it sounds like you're having a lot of fun at all times throughout the year. But whenever you're preparing your team to go out and just essentially win ball games and have fun doing it, what does a typical practice plan look like, and how much time are you spending on what? And just take us through as much of that as you can.
I will, yeah. So one of the concepts I've gotten from our football program, and they're obviously really, really good. And our football coach he told me one day that a lot of days they're just going to spend 75% skill and 25% scheme. I go, Coach, I don't know anything about football. What does that mean? He said, we're going to work on being really athletic and really good at catching balls, or really good at, throwing passes, whatever that might be, the skill of the game, and then worry about the scheme of what the other team's doing later on. And let's just run our stuff really well. And so that kind of governs a lot of what we do too. We try to there's a lot more skill than scheme. And, we don't spend as much time on bunt Ds and first thirds. And I hear people talking about that a lot more now, but we don't spend a lot of time practicing a squeeze and that sort of thing, because it's not as much of what determines wins and losses as other things are. So that's kind of one of an overall governing concept, is we want to develop a lot of skill, and then we will get the scheme in there. But it's a race for us because we have 3 weeks of practice, full speed practice, and then the first game hits. So we got to get that skill developed, and every hitter goes through a time frame where he gets dead hands and that kind of stuff, and let's get through that time frame as quick as we can. And so that's an overall or overriding concept for us. But I talked to several coaches the past year about how they run their stuff, big programs like we have, and so the segment that we're going to use this year is it's a little different than what we've had. We're going to start every day with an hour of skill development. Today infielders may be all defense while outfielders and catchers are hitting, and then flip it the next day or whatever. We'll do an hour of skill development. Then we're going to have an hour of the entire program together.
Okay.
And then the rest will be TBD based on who's got what going on. It could be that the varsity needs to come back and run a BP cycle, or it could be that, the varsity's it's been 2 game days in a row, and then we had a practice, so they need to be done at that point. It just kind of depends on how it'll go. But I think a lot of big programs are practicing their whole program together, and I've never done it. And I'm excited about it because we've got 7 coaches, and they're all going to be on the field at the same time working with those guys. And I think, it's going to be a great concept for us to get everybody out there together, and it creates some continuity, I think, as well. So I think that's the overall overview of it. And early in the year, we're really about reps and inter squads. And as the year goes on, we're more interested in kind of getting the players almost knowing everything that's going to go on in a practice before it does, so that it becomes very familiar to them. And, I think one thing that we try to do every day in a practice is get guys out of their comfort zone one way or the other. We all know that's where growth comes from. And so we're going to try and do that as much as we can. It's hard when you got a lot of guys, but we're going to try and do, it is. And we're going to try and do, we're lucky with our facilities. I understand that. And we try to, make the most use we can out of them.
Well, that and you won't ever have to be confused that your sub-varsity teams are not doing the same things that you guys are doing.
That's right. It's a big deal. And, let's be honest, our JV coach and our freshman coach, sometimes they're there by themselves. Mm-hmm. So if I can get those coaches along with our older guys around younger guys, when older guys are developing leadership skills, younger guys are learning, okay, that JV coach he's not lying. This is really what we do. Or the freshman coach, this is really what we do. And it becomes, the continuity and everything else is really a big deal at that point. And it also gives those JV guys an idea, man, this is what I got to work towards, or the freshmen, et cetera. This is what I have to work towards to be able to be successful at that level.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I'm thinking about this in my head too. Is you've got older guys who may see some of your younger talented guys going, "Oh, I better get my stuff together." So within that, that they're together, is it more? Because I'm thinking, if you're trying to hit with all of those kids for BP, that's a lot.
No.
But, okay, yeah, so what does that hour look like?
So it'll be a lot of defensive reps. You can have several guys out there taking ground balls, mm-hmm. clearly, right. Or at a time, or we can all of our cut stuff. And, mm-hmm. and every year that we've been good, cuts and relays have been a big part of why we've been good, because somebody's going to try to take the extra base and we've thrown them out, or we've kept a back runner from getting to second base. And invariably in a JV and a freshman game, those are the things people mess up because they don't realize the real value in it. So we're going to do those sorts of things. We will get a lot of the small stuff of maybe that's where we're working a bunt defense, a first, third, a ton of the base running concepts are going at that point. Mm-hmm. Balls I can go to first or third on versus balls I can't, and that sort of thing. So a lot of that type of stuff is going to go on in that hour, as well as we're teaching stuff. How do you get on and off the field, and what does a dugout routine need to look like? We need to put our gloves in a certain place so we can fly on and off the field. We'll have contests for that kind of stuff, to teach them how to do that stuff, because in travel baseball, you just walk in, you throw your stuff in the dugout, and people aren't necessarily on and off the field like the good teams are. You go watch some of those really, really good teams that matters to them, but it doesn't matter to everybody else all the time. So it's all that how to play the game stuff goes on in there.
How to be a professional.
That's it. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Sure, of course. Well, when talking about that hour, what's your BP setup look like?
Well, first I would say that we need to make sure we understand terminology. We talked about Dan Hefner earlier, and he said he doesn't take BP. They take CP, which is crush practice, which I think is awesome. Yeah. So we try to go CP or WP. So CP would be crush practice. We're trying to hit doubles and work on our specific ability to smoke a ball. Or WP is more of a situational type setup. And so we've got a few things we do. Everybody has their standard hitting practice set up. I'm lucky enough to get to watch all these SEC guys hit around us when it's SEC tournament week. They use our field or the ones right next door. So I've seen a ton of that. Paul Maneri's team is out there with each PO in a specific spot. and like the outfielders in a different spot. And we've done that kind of thing before, and then we've had where you just put a machine. Like I remember watching South Carolina earlier this year, and they every swing was on a machine, and they were just trying to hit balls really coming in hot at them, and they're hitting every pregame swing off of a machine. We'll mess with that sort of stuff, and with just your standard grouping. But my favorite things that we do, we have a defensive BP, which is a great drill. It's Coach Shoop's got it straight from him at UAB, and we did it at Birmingham Southern. And essentially the concept is you've got a group of infielders, a group of outfielders, another group of infielders, another group of outfielders. Okay, and your dual guys, you have to go in and decide. So for that day, they're either an infielder or an outfielder. And so you'll have an infield and outfield out. They're playing defense, one group hitting and one group running the bases. Every swing is played live by the defense, or you could go every other swing, depending on what you want to do. Okay, and you're telling the base runners to push the envelope. You're trying to take the extra base. There's no punishment for being thrown out, taking the extra base. So we want live action from the outfield. Okay, and every hitter gets 2 swings, and they're trying to execute whatever situation you've got on the bases. So let's say, for example, we've got a runner at first base, and we're starting with a runner at first base. We're trying to hit a double and keep a ball out of the middle on the ground, because if you're in the middle on the ground, obviously is a bad thing. So pitch select, you got the hitting guys in there talking about pitch selection with this hitter. We got defensive guys out there talking about how we're going to play the game defensively, and every play is played out live. And it's awesome. Our kids love it. There's all kinds of creative ways of scoring it. We give a point when you're on offense if you execute that situation. When you're running the bases, you get an extra base, we give you a point. You make a routine play on defense, we give you a point. You make a web jam, we give you 2 points. And so you cycle through that. You'll have 2 periods on defense, 1 base running and 1 hitting on the day. And it is live action. It takes an hour, and it's as good of prep for a game as you can have. So I love that one. And then talking with Brian Kane, I've been around him a little bit, and he had a thing called the process game. When I got to Hoover, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to teach people how to play the game the way I'd like for them to play it. And it is literally a BP game or an inter squad, either way. But it's just like a batting practice setup when you're doing a BP game, and you are literally scoring every single aspect of baseball that is played. It takes multiple people to score it, but so you hit a foul ball, you're giving a point for a guy sprinting out of the dugout to get the foul ball. You're giving a point for guys going on and off the field in less than 10 seconds. You're giving a point for a 2-0 thrown down between innings by the catcher. You're giving a point for throwing around the infield after a strikeout in the time frame that you feel like needs to be thrown around, and so you score it all. And we just got these score sheets that go along with both it and the defensive BP game. And, it just takes the monotony of a batting practice out of the equation. And now we're trying to make it as game-like as possible if we can. And then you do those, and you start spinning breaking balls at them or change-ups or whatever. Then you're basically playing a controlled game at that point. And those are kind of our 2 favorite non-traditional batting practices to do with our whole team.
Okay. Now, another question that comes up a lot is when to get bullpens in, because a lot of our guys are two-way guys. So what's your advice on that?
So I try to take care of our throwing on the front end of practice if we can, just because you want those reps to be as uninterrupted as possible. And so you can really schedule that out, obviously. And so in that hour of skill stuff, we'd have bullpens go on, unless we're trying to throw to hitters, which I want to throw to hitters as much as we can. So we've got an indoor with 3 cages in it. We can throw live in there. We can throw on a mound live to a hitter on the game mound or whatever we want to do. And so I want them to throw to hitters as much as we can. So if we can combo the bullpen with a hitter working on a skill, whatever that might be, even if the pitcher's throwing a short box, say he's throwing 50 feet, boy, that's still great for the hitter. He's just working on velocity at that point, handling velocity. It's all good. You're learning through failure and that sort of thing. So we're going to do all our throwing on the front end of practice that we can. And then the other part of that is determining how big his role is, either pitching or hitting, because if he's the shortstop / closer, well, we only need to get, 20 pitches in at a time anyways. So let's go, and all your throws in a game are going to be after you've fielded anyways, if you played an entire game. So his practice does have to be at the end of practice because you just got to get him used to doing that. So, but generally our bullpens are at the start of practice, and we're going to throw off of an incline as much as possible with a coach talking to him the whole time. We generally don't have the coach on the back with the catcher. We generally have the coach with the pitcher talking through feel and what is he feeling. And this is maybe a feel to work on to make an adjustment where you want to feel your hip do this or feel your hand speed do that or whatever it might be.
That's really good. It's something that you're usually taking from one or the other. So any time that we can not have to do that, and obviously pitching is a fairly important part of the game. So putting that at the very first practice, I think that's a great idea. But something else that we have to deal with in season, and that's the dreaded, hey coach, or even worse, the playing time email. So let's say that let's go from worst case to better case scenario. And so parent emails you and says, why did little Johnny not getting the playing time that he deserves? I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you would respond to that. And then also on the back end of that, if little Johnny actually comes up to you and asks you. So let's start with the first scenario with the parent.
Okay. Well, so the good news at Hoover is generally, I believe all sports are this way, but we're not talking to parents about playing time. That's just not going to happen. I'll talk to a player about it all day long not all day long, but if they want to come talk, let's have that talk. A parent, we're not going to speak about it. It's just not a thing it's not a look that we want. It's not something that they're generally going to understand anyways. And so talking to parents, it doesn't happen very much at all. Every once in a while you'll get one that thinks that, well, he doesn't really mean that, but we're just not going to talk about it. They'll come in and ask, what can my son do to get better and that sort of thing. And honesty to me is the only way you need to go with that. And so we'll tell them what we think. And we keep a ton of data on different things. And they may not know that their son may have been the best Little League player ever. And now he's just slower than everybody else or whatever it might be. And sometimes they don't know that. But generally, that communication needs to come from their son. So in season, that's not where we're going to go. But we'll talk to a player in season a ton. I mean, it's an open door as far as that's concerned.
Well, that's good. I like that a lot. And that's just part of their maturation process.
Yes. I mean, you want them to be able to have a conversation with an adult. And what I would say to every coach that is having to talk to a player or a parent, I think you need to have somebody else in the room with you. Mm-hmm. I think you need to have somebody else there because you're going to think you said something one way and it's going to be taken a different way. And that you need somebody you trust and there and go, hey, Adam, you may not have meant to say it the way that just came out. And they can help you with it. Or when it's all over with, they can also be the person if somebody questions what went on in that meeting, they can say, no, that's exactly what he said. It was right here. I listened to the whole thing. Mm. So, but now when it comes to players, I'll talk to anybody about it, just with the understanding it's going to be open and honest. And I think it's a good thing if players are asking you. That may be different than other people, but to me, you want guys who want to play. You don't want guys who want to get the jersey and sit there. You want guys who want to be a part of this thing. So, I think that's a thing that we need to encourage them to ask questions as much as possible.
Right. And, if we're open and honest with them, it's just going to help them. It's going to help team morale. And it's better for the kid, especially in the long run. But I do want to end with some quick lightning style questions, and there are 6 of them.
Yeah.
So, the first one that I always like to know is what do you wish you'd have known your first year, or what advice do you have for first-year head coaches in general?
Ooh, there's some. That's a loaded one a little bit, but I would say the first thing is you don't have it figured out. Be a learner. Don't go into this thing thinking. If you're an assistant coach, you can go in here thinking, I would have. It's always easy to know what you think you would have done, mm-hmm. but you don't really know what you would have done until you're in charge. So be a learner from other people, and establishing a network to me. And so I view this thing like almost like a library. You walk into a library and just start looking at books, you're in trouble. You better have a way to go to the card catalog or whatever it is that library is using now to index those books, to go to the section you need to do or you need to be looking at. Well, it's the same as coaching. or same with coaching. I need to, if I want to learn about hitting, I need to have a network of guys that I trust that can tell me, hey, this is a great person to learn from, or pitching or fielding or whatever, and have that network, set it up, trust them to help you. And we're all in this thing together. I haven't met many coaches that don't share information. And if I have, then move on to the next guy. It's not a big deal. So I would say that. And then the other thing I would say, advice to a first-year young coach, whatever, is that you need to understand everybody's always got something going on. Kevin Love did a thing earlier this year, maybe it was last year, where he had the depression thing going on. And the more you can find out what somebody's got going on and help them work through whatever it is that's going on, the better off you're going to be as a person, the better off that other person's going to be, and the more of an impact you can have. And it can get real quick. Mm-hmm. You know, I've been called out of a classroom with a parent who thought that their kid was going to do the ultimate worst thing to themselves. Well, if that relationship hadn't been what it was, I don't know if we could have related to that guy, but it was, and kid's fine today, and it's all good. But everybody's got something going on. I mean, like myself, I tell our players all the time, not everybody knows, I was diagnosed 7 years ago with Crohn's disease. And so every day can be a tough day, or lots of days can be tough days for me. My stomach can feel like it's on fire. And I tell my players, like, hey, if you see that, you see I may be having a tough day, tell our assistant coach, you see I may be having a tough day. It may really be a tough day, but it also gave me being diagnosed with that gives me the knowledge to deal with a kid who is such a God thing. 2 years ago, I've got two kids who've got big time stomach issues, mm-hmm. and not everybody might have even realized. A lot of coaches don't even understand that that's a thing, that can really be a thing. They think, well, you're just being soft or whatever. Man, if your stomach's messed up, sometimes it can ruin everything about you, and you need to go take a few minutes and go take care of some stuff, and then come on back, and you're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody's got something going on, so let's see if we can help people deal with what's going on in their life, and then everything else can be better because of it.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We have our starting shortstop this year has Crohn's disease, and he had it managed fairly well for 17 years, and then missed maybe the last month of the season because he changed, his medication changed a little bit, and he had to figure out what was going to work for him. So, man, I know that's something that's not a whole lot of fun to deal with, and that's something that we're, like you said, a lot of people don't really know about it, but definitely something that affects you greatly. The second question,
no doubt.
Second question is, what is the latest thing learned that you are really excited about?
Well, I think you know the answer to this already because we're on a little bit of a text message board group. But the data revolution, mm-hmm. and putting data into baseball or using the data of baseball as well as possible at our level is something that I probably have looked like a little bit of a nerd recently. I probably am a nerd anyways, but my head's in a book of some kind all the time, trying to learn as much as I can about this and taking that data revolution and all the new data and how can I individualize our kids' specific experience, whether it be hitting or pitching or whatever, to make their experience the best experience possible. And to develop them as much as possible. So I think that's a big thing for me that I'm excited about, and I think it's a rabbit hole now. I would advocate that anybody jumps in this rabbit hole better have a good exit strategy because you can get going for a long time.
100%. Question 3 is, what is something that you do in practice that your players love?
Compete. We love to compete, and we do all kinds of them. The best competition, though, is where there's the most juice is when our pitchers get to hit because they threw a shutout. We had to take POBP. That's the best day of the year, or best times of the year, because our kid, it is straight up heckle time. And if they throw a shutout, we let them hit. And they sometimes forget that we're not going to let you hit. Like if we threw a shutout yesterday and it's a big game today, we're probably not hitting today. We're probably going to hit another day. But POBP is a fun thing, and our guys they like competing at anything really.
Okay, another good one that I like to ask, and it tells a pretty interesting story. Is what is something that you believe that other coaches may disagree with you about?
Well, I'd say there's probably a couple things. The first one would be play the best possible competition you can play, and a lot of people say that, but they don't do it, or they think they're doing it. We've played in the past couple of years teams from California, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee. We're going to go play the best we can play. And this year we went to Georgia and played 4 games against 3 eventual state champions, and our team got better from it. And I think if all you're doing is hunting to win, then you're not going to do that. So if what you're hunting is growth, then you're going to do it, and you're going to win a lot of those games anyways, because you're going to handle things really well in those games. So that's the first thing. Go play the best you can possibly play. The second thing is that, to me, I'm probably different on people, is I don't think that even keel always wins. I know a lot of people feel that way, that you need to approach big games like they're any other game. And I think a large part of that is definitely true, but I think big games and big wins require big moments by people, by players, and it's our job to get kids familiar with those big moments in practice. It's just, I think that's part of teaching a kid how to be a man is hey, understand this is really important, and these are important times, and you need to be able to perform at an important time. Now, what that level of success is at those important times, I'm not saying that in a big at bat that you got to get the hit necessarily. We want you to get the hit, but did you square the ball up and the guy made a great play? Well, it is what it is. But to think that when Hoover is playing Vestavia, it's as good a rivalry as there is in the country. And there's 1,500 people there, and half of them hate you and half of them love you, and the game's on the line. You're trying to tell a kid that's not a big deal. I don't think you're doing them the right service in life at that point.
Okay, I like that. If we came to your practice, what would be 3 things that you think would stand out?
I hope you would see energy.
Okay,
I really do. I think that's a thing that would stand out. I think you'd see action from our guys. A lot of stuff going on, not a lot of standing. I hope there's days that there's more standing than others. I hope there's not a lot of standing around. And then I think the last thing, I hope you'd see guys coaching and investing in kids. I hope that would be something that stands out to you. And if you came to practice, we would welcome it. No, I'm not just saying it because it's you. Our practices are open. You just need to be willing to watch your son be coached, and you can be there.
Okay. And then final one is, what are some of your favorite books or resources that have shaped your coaching career?
Oh, man. Well, clearly the Bible would start off that list for me.
Okay.
I'm kind of I read a lot. So Zan Barksdale gave me a book called The Go-Giver a month or 2 ago. And that's been really, to me, it's been something that has been really spoken to me, because it's all about how much you give is going to be the measure of you as a person. I thought that was great. The Messiah Method was really a good book for me. That's Dan Hefter recommended that to me, and I hate to sound like this name dropper guy. It's not what I'm trying to be, but it's about a soccer program and the standards they go by, and then it's really, really good. Anything by Andy Andrews to me has always been really good, and I'm a big podcast guy, so I listen to yours a lot. I listen to ABCA, Driveline, Cressy's podcast. Tim Ferriss is really cool. It's kind of out there a little bit. And then I love Navy SEAL Special Forces type books. There's only about 1,000 of those things out there now, but those things speak to me. About hard work and going by a process. So I think those are some of the things I think that would be a big deal. It all. I think you just got to be useful with your time when it comes to those things, and I would just suggest turn that TV off. Maybe have yourself one TV series. Like, I'm going to watch Yellowstone. I love that TV series. But other than that, we don't watch a whole lot of TV. I'm trying to do stuff, trying to learn a little bit, read a little bit, get a little better, and then be a good dad. And so I think all those, if you have the right books and resources, I think those things, kind of speak to that.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, we all appreciate your time, and we've gotten a tremendous look of what you're doing and what your assistant coaches are building and have built at Hoover, and it's been amazing for all the stuff that you've shared with us today. But if any of our listeners want to get in touch and ask you just about anything that you talked about today, what would be the best way to do that?
Okay, so I'm on Twitter. It's at Moseley Adam, but you spell my last name right. It's Moseley.
Yeah, there's an
at Moseley Adam. There is, yeah. It gets people messed up sometimes. Facebook and Instagram too. And then my email address is A Moseley. That's again Moseley at hoover.k12.al.us. And I will, if I said anything that was potentially beneficial to anybody, I'll share whatever. I've learned a long time ago that this baseball coaching fraternity is all about sharing and, frankly, about stealing from other people and in the right way. And we've been lucky enough to play people all over the country, and generally we try to take from everybody we play and do do what they do if it relates to us, and try and get something from everybody we play. And if anything I've said is helpful, then I'll share whatever. There's no hidden agenda or hidden book with us.
Well, perfect. Well, Adam, I'm just going to open up the mic for you, and our listeners are fully in tuned. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell them before we go?
I guess just a couple things. I would say, as a coach, I think the most important thing is to make sure you understand the bigger purpose, and make sure you're modeling for your kids, and that clearly includes how you talk to your family, how you treat your family in front of them, and how you treat other people. And I didn't at the beginning, but want to thank, I've had some really close friends in this coaching business, and I think, first of all, my family, but last year I was lucky enough to go with USA Baseball and go coach that 15-year-old national team. And we had a group of 4 coaches that we call on each other routinely: Jason Maxwell, Troy Gerlach, Manny Crespo, and myself. And everybody that was involved with that group, it's kind of been a great thing. And now everybody that we've been involved with USA Baseball before then, and whether it be, people that were at the National Development Program or down in Florida or Arizona at a tournament, it's been, those people have meant a lot to me, and other coaches just in the state of Alabama that have meant a ton to us. And I know, like, I'm getting asked these questions and trying to share stuff, but really all I'm doing is passing along information that all those types of people have shared with me, and just kind of consider myself really lucky to have gotten to know them and be able to share, whatever little stuff you might have gotten from them.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.